onto our show today, Mike Hagan. He's a distant conspirator who has become a very close collaborator of mine over the past few years in a mashup of our respective fields: mental health, workplace wellbeing, men's health, safety and compliance. Today, Mike and I have decided to share all the how, what, why, where, when and where we're both currently at with it all. On one of the biggest topics going around, we're going to dive deep into what organisational responsibility in addressing workplace psychosocial hazards and risks can look like, and illustrate some simple yet very effective strategies anyone can use to create safe and supportive environments. We're also going to touch on our respective roles at next week's Workplace Health and Safety Show in Sydney, which is likely to feature the latest developments in workplace safety, new tech and best practice. Hopefully our combined insights and valuable information will help anyone keen to understand the current health, safety and wellbeing landscape in Australia. We're going to do that for you today. So Mike, packed your bags yet?
Oh, that'll be the day before, Ray, I think. Probably that morning.
Now, do you pack as lightly as I do for a 3-day voyage up to the New South Welshman?
Oh, I think anybody who's travelled on the Melbourne to Sydney flight knows to pack as lightly as you possibly can. So, yeah, I've got it down to a fine art, really.
Well, I do the layering thing. I wear as many of my clothes on the flight, so even if it's really hot, I'll have a jacket, probably, both pairs of undies and so I only have to take a little backpack, which is pretty handy.
I'm getting mental pictures of Joey in Friends when he's wearing all of Chandler's clothes. And I hope that's not you on the flight, Ray.
But there are these little tips and tricks, Mike, that help us manage our mental health and wellbeing. And you and I met at the Burnout Conference here in Melbourne during that time of the COVID kerfuffle, if anyone can remember that. But I remember thinking about burnout back then, of this burnt out match and people just stretching themselves beyond capacity and burning out. But, over the years I've come to recognise that that's not what burnout really is at all. But, going back to my original point, layering your clothes and not putting too much thought into packing your bags can reduce the effects of undue stress. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, look, I find when you're travelling, the more preparation you can do, the less stressful the journey will be. One of the pastimes that I have when I'm travelling, and you travel quite a lot on your own, and we have time to kill in airports, is just watching people going through airports and just seeing the amount of stress and strain that some people are under when you see the person racing past you to get to that flight, or the people that are having the meltdown with the children because the children are distressed. And, travelling, it's quite a stressful experience. And it's also a very interesting people-watching exercise. You're
absolutely right, Mike. And, just having the benefit of being in multiple airports across the world recently, I, noticed that in people. And there was a woman who, between the flight to Abu Dhabi and Melbourne when we returned, had lost her passport, phone and all of her credit cards in Abu Dhabi. And, for a moment, I put myself aside and put myself in her shoes to think about the enormity, just even the logistical nightmare that presents, and the inconvenience on life on top of everything, that if we're not managing ourselves, then, we are very prone to that thing around burnout, which is very much to do with your psychology and your neuroscience and how, those, your whole integrated wellbeing is affected physically and mentally when we're unduly stressed.
We spoke before about how I have a tendency to oversimplify things sometimes, Ray, and I see travelling as waiting and then doing as you're asked. And as long as you're comfortable with waiting and the time delays, don't worry about the things you can't influence. So I've learned to manage my own anxieties when travelling through thinking, well, I'm going to worry about what's under my influence and the things that aren't. Why worry?
Well, that's right. And again, you can worry. We're allowed to worry, but it's how you reduce the impact on yourself physically and mentally. And, it takes me to, in London recently when my life was so amazingly bouncy and buoyant, and, I'm there. I haven't seen my son for a year. I'm seeing George. I've got Rory with me. Rose is home here, happy. And so could not be in a more privileged position. And then I received a phone call. And then my life changed because my home here in Australia had been invaded, and, my brand new car is stolen, my vintage car is written off, everything that, I value inside my house has been taken. However, in that moment, I was able to manage because I'd already set up my safety and wellbeing infrastructure inside myself. I couldn't manage my outsides, but I most certainly could manage my insides, and that enabled me to continue my journey. Thank goodness my daughter Rose, she might even be listening in, one of the most amazing people in the world, project managed my tragedy here at home in a way that, really brought us more closely together, if that's possible. And, I was able to see things in such gratitude and appreciation that I really do have a wonderful life, despite what can turn up on your doorstep.
When you called me to tell me about that, I couldn't believe your measured and calm narration of what had happened. I think I'd have been freaking out, Rae.
There was a part of me that wanted to. And, in my insides, I said to myself, how do you want this to go? What can you control? If it was one of my loved ones who was injured or worse, then I'm not sure how I would respond to that. I don't want to think about that, but that's my measuring stick. Nothing's happened to anybody, therefore everything is absolutely okay.
Bravo. Bravo.
Yeah, so it's only stuff, and stuff is not a measurement of who we are. It's who we are that's a measurement of who we are. And that's the end of the show. Goodbye, everyone.
I'm going to write that down right now. I'm going to use it, Rae.
But I was also really mindful of, other things I'd put in place. And, I wanted to ask you a question about, since we first met in Melbourne at that burnout conference and was so enormously impressed by each other, so impressed that we're back on air together, and we've got so much to unpack about what you and I are achieving together and independently. However, neuroscience has really helped me understand more about the human condition. And, my boyfriend, everyone might know Andrew Huberman. He doesn't know he's my boyfriend, but I do check in with him every day. And, Professor Andrew Huberman, who runs a Huberman Lab podcast, I've learned so much from him over the years. Things like I've given up drinking and I've almost been sober now for 2 years, thanks to really hacking into how I drive my body and my brain separately and together. So for you, Mike, and that's really helped me in terms of how I illustrate things to my clients as well, getting away from you need to fix things to how do we capitalize on what we've got. And this brain and body that we have is phenomenal. And the more that you find out about it, the more exciting life gets.
Well, they say that we actually still know more about the surface of the moon than we do how the brain works. And when you think about even, at a global level, clinicians still don't align completely on what the causes of depression are. There's no MRI, there's no scan you can have of your brain that can identify a mental illness. So it really is, I think, a journey of discovery, this one, really.
So since we met, going back to that question, what are the most salient things that have changed for you or you've discovered?
Wow.
And that could be about yourself rather, because we are going to dig a bit more deeply into you in the next segment. So
you never told me that when we agreed to do the show.
No, I love the bit of a surprise element.
Oh, what's happened? So that's probably more than 2 years ago now, right?
It's closer to 3, actually.
I remember it was just coming out. It was the first time I've been back in the city after COVID, because I remember looking at these high rises and I'm thinking, they weren't there last time I was here.
Yeah.
But so quite a lot's changed, really. I mean, I was invited along to speak at that event because at the time I was a human resources and health and safety manager for a corporate organisation, Bosch, the German company, and I'd been ruminating for quite a while about starting my own consultation business around mental health in the workplace. And I think the technical term is we had a chat and then you kicked me up the arse and give me some salient points as to do the things that I've done since. So thank you for that, Rae.
Even a jump in the safety net will appear.
And so I've been now, I guess I've been trading for about 18 months as Mike Hagan Consultant Services. I couldn't think of a more original title, really. So it's been a real interesting journey and a huge learning curve, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah.
I'm getting to focus on things that I'm really passionate about. I'm working with some great organisations that share the passion to do the right things. Don't always know what the right things are, but certainly open to conversations. What are the learnings? From a personal point of view, I've learned that when you're in a role, even a high pressure role, because you are coping well doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. And I think it's until you step away from a role and you just see how your body and your mind reacts. I also think I became a little bit smarter, Rae. It's not terribly egotistical. But when you can actually just focus on one area without 15 emails coming through every hour and the phone ringing off the wall and people knocking on the door and bringing some interesting quandaries to you. Being able to focus and really pull some projects together with a lot of focus and intent has been really quite enjoyable. The areas that I've ended up gravitating towards working in, because I don't think I had a defined plan as to what I would end up doing, but it's ended up helping organisations. I mentioned that I was human resources and health and safety, and that's one of the premises that I've been asked to go to Sydney next week. So when people ask me, what is it you do now, Mike? I tell them that I just fill in the cracks. And they say, well, you're a plasterer. well, no, not really. And the gaps I'm talking about are the gaps I see in organisations around the management of psychosocial health. Because traditionally, if it was a health and safety issue, it went down the corridor to the health and safety department. And if it was a people topic, you turned left and you went to human resources. And I think, the luxury of that simplistic view of how a workplace is have long faded. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to navigate the space between. And it needs to be navigated because, it's not a case of there's heroes and villains, but departments aren't working together, functions aren't working together, not because they're bad people. It's because they've got a different lens and I guess a different set of priorities from what those functions have traditionally done. So I spend a huge amount of time working with both human resource functions and health and safety functions to better align and put the things in place that actually prevent being harmed. We spoke off air. You mentioned some of the things you'd seen in Europe where there's still a tendency to rely on fruit on Fridays and yoga sessions. And it's good to see in Australia we're so far ahead of that curve. And I work with organisations across a broad spectrum of, we talk about psychosocial risk assessment. Let's get that word out the way, psychosocial. It's mental health in the workplace. The term psychosocial, it's sort of two words glued together. It talks about the psychology and the social environment. In our context, the social environment is a workplace. So when we talk about psychosocial, and I'll drop that word in occasionally as we go through, all I'm talking about is the mental health in the workplace. And long rambling answer, but it's far too broad a topic. It's far too complex and layered a topic for one function to take ownership. And it's not about health and safety and human resources. It's about leadership too. So I spend a lot of time at the moment working with leaders who want to better understand this brave new world that we live in.
A few things came out of that for me when you said you fill in the cracks. You're like that Sally's polyfiller that expands in the cracks. It just doesn't fill it. It starts out small and it expands to fill, because I think what I love about your work right from the get-go is that you evolve with people. You don't have a fixed solution that you apply. You like that. You start off small, then you expand to the needs of the organisation, which I think is your secret power. So now you're the polyfiller.
Polyfiller?
Yeah. Sally's is a great brand. But also I really appreciate you didn't ramble on at all, by the way, then, about, approaching mental health as opposed to psychosocial hazards and risks. That's even a hard thing to say for most people. However, we do understand what our mental health is now because, over the last 15, 20 years, we have evolved to really understand that is not one point in the ground. That is an ever-changing space, minute by minute, second by second, day by day. But you mentioned also to me when you came in that you wanted to give just a little bit of a case study of a client that you're working with that can really paint that picture of how simple it is to affect change.
This is a very recent one, Rae. So last week I'd done some work for an organisation, and Chris, the owner, knows I'm mentioning the company. It's been around town. They set off as 2 people in a kitchen, and then there was 5, then there was 7, then there was 15 people.
What are they doing, making baked beans?
Coffee distribution, but it's much more. You go to their place, and as you go in, their business model is, if you want to run a cafe, you go into their ground floor area, and by the time you've done a clockwise circuit, you know everything you need to know about opening a cafe, how to make a coffee.
Get out.
And I must say, Rae, it is the best smelling workplace I have ever been in. But I digress. So, been around town, great organisation. And
are they a family business?
They are, they are. So Chris and his wife run the business, and 15 people, and they're wanting to ensure people's mental health and well-being from the ground floor up, which I thought was incredible.
Why?
So they realised that, that was my first question. It's very noble, I'm very impressed, but why? And they realised the significant rate of change that they're going through. And the owner's a listener. He listens to people. And there was a recommendation from a workshop that I'd run for another organisation, and they said, maybe speak to Mike. So it was that classic consultant conversation where you say to people, what is it you want? And then you help them understand what it is that they want. And Chris just wanted people to be safe in the workplace, secure in the workplace, and, in a good place. The workplace shouldn't negatively impact.
Had he had an experience himself?
I didn't actually ask that question, and I wouldn't go into that without Chris's permission either to talk about that, certainly on air. But his reference points around understanding. So the first thing we did was an employee survey around mental health. The things that he's doing, the things that multinationals should be doing, really.
What's one example of that?
Well, it was from putting a survey together to try and understand where people were, and not just from the workplace. It was the set of questions were quite broad, because he understands that people don't turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning and switch on their mental health. It's more holistic than that. And then through to looking at those results and saying, right, Mike, can we do this with this group and this with this group, and what do you think? So it really quite a basic but really well thought out and strategic approach. It didn't take long to put together. It was understand the problem and don't try and give a one-size-fit-all answer. So for an organisation of 15 people, and I get free coffee when I go.
Now, I listened to a podcast you were interviewed in earlier in the year, a very prominent health and safety podcast, and you referred to the difference between surveying and risk assessment. And I really liked that, we're so fatigued by surveys, survey this because a company wants to know what you're thinking, feeling, wanting, as opposed to you saying the difference of having a risk assessment, which is actually assessing the risk of the organisation with the people that sit inside it. So therefore, as a participant, I might be more concerned about what risk I'm at rather than what my organisation wants me to tell them.
A couple of points that jump off the page there, Rae. One is survey. So let me just talk about survey fatigue. It doesn't exist. The fatigue is around people not seeing a result or hearing feedback from the survey that they volunteered or participated in. And I speak to many organisations and say, we don't want to do another survey because people are over it. No, people are over the lack of response or the time frames from a survey to getting any, courtesy feedback to say thank you very much and, this is what we intend to do next. So I often have interesting conversations to navigate when people tell me they've got survey fatigue. Risk assessment. When I used to do a little bit of risk assessment training for particularly international audiences, I used to have a little bit of fun with this. And I would tell them that everybody in Australia has a swimming pool. They often believe me. And I would tell them that in the swimming pool, you may have a shark. And I use this analogy.
I thought you were going to say something else then.
I use it as an analogy because people often juxtapose the term risk with hazard. And so we can see the shark and we're sat on the balcony and we're looking at the shark. The shark is the hazard, the thing with potential to do harm. The risk, well, we're sat on the balcony and we're 10 metres away, so the risk is minimal. Then I really want to show you the shark because it's got really dark eyes. So let's go and have a closer look. And we move closer to the shark and the risk starts to increase, the hazard remains the same. And then I decide I'm going to try and swim across the pool. Well, the risk has just become exponential now, but the hazard remains the same. So bringing that back to a mental health or a psychosocial context, one of the things the survey does well is it just gathers raw data so people can see what the potential things that may do harm are. So it's to identify the hazards and then say, okay, how likely will those hazards eventuate in harm? So that's probably the second area that I spend a lot of time and have developed a risk assessment tool around this that looks at, how often people are exposed to the things. Now, there may not be sharks in pools, but certainly in terms of the psychosocial aspects in the workplace, you and I are very, very familiar around the topics we'll cover at some point where we talk about the things that eventuate in burnout. So hazards and risks, risk assessments. A survey is not a risk assessment. It's a gathering of raw data that then you can do something with a risk assessment process.
Well, thank you for describing it like that as well. I could listen to you all the day long. We're going to go to the first break, Mike. Now, usually I'd be playing the very special guest song request game, but today, because it's you and I sort of collaborating on the same level, we have gathered a little stable of songs, and I normally have very strict rules around the duration of the songs as well. As it came up originally, I reached out to my audience, being number 2 son Rory and myself, and so Rory came up with a 5-minute song, you came up with 2 5-minute songs, and I came up with a 5-minute song. So usually I keep it to 3.5 minutes. But today, out the window, you can have whatever you want. However, overnight, you changed your mind about one of your 5-minute songs and came in bang on the time. Yeah. So when we come back, you can tell us more about your reasons for selecting this song, and we're going to dive straight, going to rewind the clock quite a bit to where it all started for you, and in a very concise nutshell describe your trajectory, why, how, where, when, what and who, to what lands you in the seat today. How does that sound?
Challenging, but I'll give it a crack.
Well, here we go. This song is called All the Young Dudes by Mott the Hoopy. Hoopy?
Hoople. The Hoople.
Yeah, they're going challenged with sight as well. Don't go away, folks. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Mike Hagan, who, amongst many things, is a distant conspirator. So 2 questions there, Mike. Why are you a distant conspirator, and why was that song selected? I'm not going to use the term a musician. I've got a guitar and I shout at people. That is so... he undersells himself terribly, by the way, people.
So the Distant Conspirators was... it wasn't a real band. It was something I put together in COVID, and it was a recording project because, we couldn't go out and do gigs anymore. And I got a lot of collaborations going with people around the world, and they donated tracks and sent bits and pieces in, and I magically glued it together to produce an album. And then we were asked to do a couple of shows, one of which was yesterday for the Peter Mac Cancer Charity. And
you're wearing the T-shirt to tell the story?
I got a T-shirt. So Mike Hagan and the Distant Conspirators were massive in Maui. So check that out on the internet. It's all up there. One of the poignant things from that was I managed, when I was putting the album together, I found an old recording of my dad playing his squeeze box. My dad died many years ago. And with the digital technology we got these days, I actually managed to clean the signal up and graft it into one of the tracks. So there's a track with myself and my dad on. So I was quite emotional.
Yeah.
What was your second question? Why the song?
Yeah, because you said that you texted me this morning to say, hey, can I just change my song?
Preparing for this, the hardest part was choosing 2 songs. There's so many songs and so many stories. Mott the Hoople, why did I choose that song? My all-time favourite band, one of the best kept secrets in rock and roll world, in my opinion. And a family tie, because I'm the youngest I've got 2 elder brothers and 3 elder sisters, so I inherited the finest 70s record collection you could ever wish for. I use the word inherited, they say stole. And I remember seeing an album with a really interesting cover that I'd never heard, and I picked out Mott the Hoople's greatest hits, and I recommend you to have a listen and check it out yourself. And he also, going back to the Distant Conspirators, Ian Hunter, the singer, he's a prolific songwriter, and he gave me permission to sing in a band without a great singing voice. So,
is that subjective? A great singing voice? First people I think about are Cyndi Lauper, Kylie Minogue, Elvis Presley, who evidently don't have great singing voices either. However,
somebody once said to me, a great singing voice is somebody, no matter what song they're singing, you know it's them. So you would always know it's Elvis. You would all know it's Frank Sinatra. I would argue you'd still know it was John Lydon from the Sex Pistols. So I guess it's subjective. Yeah,
but it's what sounds good in conjunction with a whole bunch of other stuff. So art is subjective. So thank you for answering those questions so succinctly. But you now have about 25 minutes to run around in a space that is Mike Hagan to help our listeners understand. And look, listeners, you can refer back to a previous interview Mike and I did a couple of years ago, which really, really does dive very deeply into Mike's background. But where it all started for Mike in the health and safety space wasn't here in Australia. He's got quite an illustrious, accomplished career. And so what's led you to here, Mike, in terms of now you can look at the trajectory and say they are all key elements of what I use today that I didn't know at the time?
I think I can refine that to the elevator pitch version, Rae, because as you said, we did talk about that in some depth. I always, we all have imposter syndrome. Everybody
no, I don't agree with
syndrome.
It. I strongly disagree with imposter syndrome.
I'll introduce you to mine later.
I think it's just a scapegoat for people.
I'll introduce you to my scapegoat later. Go with the line. So where I view it is, you introduced me as a mental health workplace consultant, and I hear that, and I actually like to think of myself as a failed electrician. Because I'm from that era where you got the job and then they done the medical. So I'm 1 week into an electrical apprenticeship and I had a tap on the shoulder to say, Mike, we've got the medical results. A couple of things. You're colourblind and you're now a fitter and turner. Which wasn't a bad thing because I was working on a nuclear plant, and a colourblind electrician on a nuclear plant isn't actually a good thing. I was 25 years in the nuclear industry and I got to do a wide array of things. I'd always had a passion around safety, and I volunteered to be a health and safety rep.
Why did you have a passion around safety?
I had a passion around safety because I had a friend at the time whose brother had been killed in a logistics accident at the age of 17. And even at that very formative age, I just didn't think people should die in the workplace. And I got a chance to volunteer to be a health and safety rep and had a couple of good mentors. Back in the day then, you had to be the shop steward to be the health and safety rep, and I didn't know much about that, but that went with the package. And, that was really where I went back into education from the health and safety point of view from the union. And I was clearly too effective, Rae, because they made me a manager. And I went back to school in my 20s. I imagine it's a lot easier when you're 16, but I was a slow learner. And I became a plant manager on what is the largest nuclear waste silo in the United Kingdom. And that's where I had my lived experience of the diagnosis when I finally did speak to a doctor after 5 years of masking this was a generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety. And that was a huge learning experience, and it was born by burnout. We mentioned burnout earlier. Burnout is not an illness. Burnout is not a disease. Burnout is a workplace phenomena where the work hasn't been managed. Now, that doesn't mean bad company, because sometimes I look back and I think, well, I used to say I had burnout because I had a really stressful job. I didn't. I had burnout because I had a very challenging job and I did not have a clue how to look after myself. So since that time, it was some 25 years ago, I don't tell people I used to have anxiety. I do have anxiety, but I've learned how to manage it across the years and adjust as life changes. So over the last 25 years, I've been in health and safety roles. I went back and studied, it was a civil service, so I think the title was health and safety officer back then, and then you became a specialist and you became a manager. And karma being what it is, I ended up as a safety manager for the plant where I'd suffered the mental burnout. And ever since then, I've been in health and safety, and for the last 14 years, human resource roles, both in the UK and in Australia. And everywhere I've been, I've put in place mental health plans. Looking back now, there's lots of things I would have done differently, but I always had a lens around mental health. And I guess part of it was I just didn't want people, to lose, almost a decade of their life being impacted by something that can be remedied with education. So I guess really what I marvel at is to work with organisations and people, and through helping them discover things about themselves and about how they're doing their work, that can actually, mitigate some dreadful mental health conditions that, are so easily managed. But because of this dreadful stigma that we've got around mental health, and not just in the workplace, in society generally, they don't feel they can go and speak about this. They don't feel they can get that help. So I'm not a counsellor. I'm not in your shoes. I'm never gonna tell people how their prefrontal cortex speaks to their amygdala. If I tell you that, just remind me I'm a
The fact that you know those two parts of the brain is impressive.
Yeah, just remind me that I'm a fitter and turner if I ever say that. But yeah, so again, a meandering answer, but I think the advantage I have when I have conversations with people is I've been impacted. I've been a tradie, I've been a union rep, I've been the HR person. All the people you get together to consult, I've been all of those roles. So it does give perspective.
Yeah, that is, I think that's probably something that could be missing before when you were talking about, HR and health and safety and, how we have to evolve those traditional roles or traditional, say, departments, used to be the personnel department, and the responsibility around how we're caring and managing for people in the workplace is changing. But, your experience, your trajectory, but also your self-awareness, because that's something you mentioned early on, is that your workplace, whilst there was pressures in the workplace, you didn't have a clue how to manage yourself. And I think, here in Australia, I love that we're shifting to that model. You gave the example before about the coffee organisation that you're working with, and I asked, why are they focusing on mental health? And, I had the chance to speak recently at the Family Business Association conference, and also the pleasure of buddying up with Murray Furlong. He's the General Manager of the Fair Work Commission here in Australia. And to be able to give that perspective of Australia have made this beautiful, workable, tangible framework for any business, whether you're a small business of 15 or, a multinational, that you can follow this framework. And if you don't give a shit about people, give a shit about the fact that you're mitigating risk for your workplace's survival in terms of litigation.
I'm going to steal that as well, Rae. I like that.
Thank you. You can have the recording later.
The oversimplification I apply to this, really, I think there's predominantly two things that cause mental health issues in a workplace, and it's bad behaviour and it's bad work. Now, if I set off with bad work or work design, nobody designs bad work, but work can very, very quickly become dated. And the thing that, we used to do for a set of valid reasons and was a good idea can become tarnished very quickly with, changes in supply, changes in the environment, changes in the economy. And all of a sudden, the thing that was put in place to assist people can be hurting people. And the second part were poor behaviour. Poor behaviour is just poor behaviour, and it needs to be corrected. So, I think I always take the lens that there's two things that predominantly play out that, I always like a good Venn diagram. And if you draw a Venn diagram around those, you've got the true mental health culture of an organisation that lives where those two pieces interact.
Yeah. And going back to that framework bit, is giving people a reason. And you talk about poor behaviour. Behaviour comes from somewhere. And in my world, we try to understand that there's no bad people. There's no bad behaviour. It's behaviour that has come from another place. So we need to actually do a diagnostic on the root cause of something rather than just this judgment and stereotyping of bad people, bad behaviour need to be disciplined or need to be extracted.
Yeah.
But something that you've, in your evolution over the last couple of years, you've come to land on, and I'm going to hold it up to you now just in case you've forgotten what it is. Wellfish.
Wellfish, yeah.
It's something that you've created out of your very smart brain and experience that I'm incredibly enamoured with. And I want you to describe a little bit to our audience where that came from and what it is, because it's really cool.
I'll tell you the where it is first. So the idea popped into my head on an early morning walk beside the Murray River in Echuca. I was on vacation.
So that wasn't in Maui.
No, it wasn't. No, usually Maui.
Your rock and roll town.
So I had the privilege of one of my elder sisters being out last year, and we had a week up in Echuca. And I think sometimes you take a break for a few days, and those half thoughts have time to align in maybe in your prefrontal cortex or your amygdala. I'm not sure, right? So I had an idea, and the idea was, I'm spending a lot of time speaking to people in organisations. I'm doing a lot of training around mental health awareness in the workplace. And, you described beautifully earlier how, your mental framework of the things you put in place have supported you so well with the dreadful news that you had when you were in London. And when I speak to people about, what do you do to build your own framework, they'll often tell me the thing that they used to do. And I used to go bushwalking, or I used to do a bit of cooking. And when I asked them why they don't do it, not everybody, but a common answer I was getting was, the first one is, I don't have time. And the second one is, if I give you the gift of time, would you still do it? And people would say they felt selfish. And when I looked at the definition of selfish, it's doing things for yourself to the detriment of others. And then when I looked up the definition of wellness, that's got a much more positive connotation. So I kind of welded the two words together and I came up with Wellfish. And the Wellfish program I put together, I call it it's a cosmic tap on the shoulder to remind people that they are important and to take care of themselves. And the beautiful, it's probably the favourite part of my job, is delivering Wellfish seminars. And what you've got on your desk is a couple of Wellfish stickers that I encourage people to place somewhere where they feel stress. So it could be your work computer, it could be your dashboard.
You need a little link to, you need to make a little thing on your website where people can go to get Wellfish resources and things like that.
That's in the pipeline. That is on the action plan. So it was actually the Wellfish sessions I run for Being Around Town, a version of that. And it's very, very new. So I've run a number of trials with organisations. The only thing I've asked organisations is, can I have access to the participants for a survey, and 78% of the people who have attended 2 weeks later were doing something around their own well-being.
Wow.
Now, I'm sure that will drop off over time, but I think it's
if you can get 1% of those people doing something for themselves, that's a huge achievement.
It is, and it's done in a very non-threatening way. I use you see me present. I use stories now. I take a light-hearted approach to a very serious topic, because I've certainly sat down on the receiving end of some mental health seminars that weren't good for my mental health, and Wellfish is not that. No,
and you've just said it yourself. Then the way that you deliver. And that's what human beings connect to. We forget that human beings love being with human beings they like. That's it. So if you're likable and you're engaging and you care and you're kind, probably that is most of it. You said before, I'm not a counsellor. Everybody has the capacity to care. That's it.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're a psychopath, and that's very unfortunate that you were born without the ability to feel.
And thankfully, they're quite rare.
Yes. But we must feel sorry for those people. They're not bad people. They're people born without a feature, which is really critical to...
It's sad, isn't it?
Yeah. But that's a whole other story around, mental illness and how, stigma still continues to sideline these people from any proper health or health care. And, it's our justice system and continue building jails that evidently take care of that.
Just before we move off the wellfish, one of the things I talk to people about, the first thing is, why is there a stigma and how far does it go back in history? And the written records of stigma around mental health go back 4,500 years. In Mesopotamia, so ancient Egypt, there's been a scroll, and the scroll, they believe, was written by military surgeons or for military surgeons, and it has 49 conditions and the causes of the conditions. And one of the conditions describes what we would call a psychotic episode today. And the reason given in the Mesopotamian scrolls is due to a supernatural nature. So even 4,500 years ago, we were saying, there'd be devils, there'd be scary things. Yeah. And stigma can't live without ignorance and fear. So we've been, stigmatizing for 4,500 years, at least in written form. Yeah. So how do we change that? One conversation at a time, really.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? You're coming, away from the UK, spend quite a bit of time in the British Museum, which is pretty mind-blowing, the stuff that's there. And, even visiting places like, Stonehenge and how this stuff happens, for us mere mortal Australians is just incredible. The beauty of human beings, the ability of human beings and what capacity we have to create. And create beauty as well. Still really sitting with me quite strongly at the moment. But, the scroll that you're describing, pretty sure it's in the British Museum maybe, because it got the big Egyptian 2 floors.
It's actually called, now this isn't going to sound very Mesopotamian, it's actually called the Edwin Smith scrolls. Now, Edwin Smith was an American archaeologist, and he bought the scrolls on a market in Luxor in about 1832. And named them after himself. He discovered them. That means I discover bread and milk in Coles every Thursday night.
Yeah.
But the Edwin Smith scrolls, check it out. It's a great read. It's a great story.
No, I definitely will. Before we go to the break, though, we've got enough just for one other question. And that went so fast, and I don't think I really gave you much, paid much homage to your amazing background. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing HSC compliance in the Australian workplace today? And I say compliance in that, that's the framework I spoke about before. What are organisations just blind to that could be so easily implemented?
Okay, a quick answer to a very complex question. Let me cover a couple of things. When we talk about compliance, people gravitate towards legislation. And the legislative landscape in Australia, in a nutshell, is every state apart from Victoria is under the Workplace Health and Safety Act and a subsequent psychosocial health regulation, which is very prescriptive and describes that life cycle of discovery, risk assessment, put in measures, monitor the effectiveness of the measures. And I've spoken to some organisations that say, well, Victoria is still under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and despite being the first state and territory to draft some psychosocial regulations, they've never issued them. So they say, well, we're actually behind. In terms of prosecutions across psychosocial breaches, Victoria are leading the charge by a long, long way. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, under the health part of that phrase, he always has considered psychosocial. Now, is it front and centre and evident? No, it's not. But I had a chat with a colleague who is in the WorkSafe psychosocial health group, and he made a great point. He said, look, Mike, we've been talking about this in detail for years. People can't say we didn't know what we needed to do. So there's a gap around people's understanding of the legislation, particularly in Victoria, and people think, well, we'll wait and see what happens when the law changes. The law's in place. The laws are effective. The laws are being used to prosecute people who breach. In terms of what I'm seeing in organisations, it goes back to the earlier part with filling in the cracks. The biggest anchor on organisations putting in place meaningful psychosocial strategies is internal tension. It's internal tension between often human resource departments, often health and safety, and there isn't one good and one bad. There's just got different priorities. So I spend a lot of my time being a Henry Kissinger type diplomat, having conversations to help people understand how they need to work together. I think if I had the magic 2 wishes, one would be helping leadership groups understand that psychosocial health does not live in a department. It actually starts in the CEO's office. And helping organisations understand our focus shouldn't be fruit bowls, and it shouldn't be yoga on Friday. It should be looking at our work practices and consulting, as we're obliged to do, to understand what things are actually causing the harm. I love the quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he said, there comes a time when we have to stop pulling people out of the river and go upstream and see why people are falling in. Yeah, I spend quite a lot of time talking to organisations about that, right?
That's a really good point, and again said very succinctly. And I would back that up by, some are, they're probably the top 5 hazards or risks. One of them being, not having clarity about why you're turning up in a workplace. If you don't know what your purpose is when you go to work, that is such a big hazard, such a big risk to the human condition.
And something that we just used to shrug off and go, oh, it's the job. But now we realise, having 3 bosses, 5 different priorities and not enough time to do any of them, it does have an impact on people.
Oh, I could not count the amount of people every week that I'd speak to say, who do you report to? Not really sure. What is your role? Well, it started as this, but I'm not really sure. That is way too easy to fix in terms of how we are addressing human beings on a regular basis within our work environment, not our workplace, but the environment is, do you know what you're turning up for? What's your responsibility? So, be clear. And anyway, we're coming to the next break, Mike, which is, I think this is time for my very special guest song request.
I'm intrigued to hear what you're going to play.
Well, I was chatting with Rory yesterday afternoon. We've just sort of spent a good 6 weeks together, continuously, and now he's sort of, we're back home, we're back into our routine where he, goes off and spends time with his dad, and it's like, oh my God, we don't see each other anymore. He goes, Mum, we just spent all this time together. It's just so we shunted off to Shots yesterday, Home Emporium in I guess it's Abbotsford, and it's an amazing place where it's got all very vintage styled furniture and stuff. So we went and sat on a lot of couches and decided we didn't like any of them. But during that time, I said, look, I've got the radio with Mike tomorrow. Give me some song requests. So Rory came up with an oldie but a goodie, because he has a very, very eclectic playlist on his Spotify, and it's a Fugees song with Lauryn Hill called Killing Me Softly, which
beautiful.
Is an old Roberta Flack song, but this one does go for a significant period of time. We might fade it out if we get a bit bored with it, but here it is, Killing Me Softly. This is for you, Rory. Don't go away, everyone. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Everyone, you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney, and I'm joined by Mike Hagan, collaborating today on a shared workplace health, safety and wellbeing stage. What do you think about that, Mike?
Odd. I'm
odd.
Often, yeah.
I thought you said odd, as in not awed.
I really need to work. I know you tell me not to, but I need to work on the accent.
I know you're saying something. You were saying poor before. I thought you were saying poo. It's poo.
Maybe I was.
Now, thank you, Rory, for that request. Probably not out of bed yet, but he might be. So text me if you are. So during the break, we were having, as we do, a good old chat about your trajectory and how impressive it is, and Tetris being the metaphor of the day of how we can build on things but make sure they slot into place, but you can always change them as well.
Indeed. And I believe I get to ask you some questions now as well.
You indeed do. I don't often get to talk about, people assume a lot about me as to why I do the work that I do, especially in men's health. And quite often that assumption is because I don't like women.
Let's put the assumptions aside and find out then.
Put your interviewing skills to the test.
To just put a framework around it, you know, you mentioned when we, the first event that we spoke at together, and I remember just seeing this incredibly powerful presence. I think I described you as a force of nature around this, and that's how you come across when you speak, a fantastic orator. And then you shared that, you know, your own mental health journey and how, I remember one of the quotes you said, some mornings I just don't want to get out of bed. And I was looking at your recently revamped website, which is fantastic. It's one of the best free resources that I've ever seen for information. And there's pictures of you stood doing toolbox talks. And there's a cast of literally hundreds, you know, look like these giant men in high V's, and you're stood there with your trademark multicoloured high V's on, and you're talking away. How does the personality I see that's doing the toolbox talks and how you've described the person that can't get out of bed, what's the relationship like between those two people?
It's a good question, because I think it's the same person. Because I always feel like there's that, you know, very, very visible authenticity in that, you know, I very much walk the talk that it's okay not to be okay. And sometimes when I am speaking at those events, I will be experiencing anxiety where I've got sweat running down my back and, you know, I'm not breathing properly. But I'll just say that at the event, this is actually happening to me right now. Yeah, and I'm very okay with that. People still won't believe you because they can't literally see it unless they come and stick their hand up my back.
I think that's illegal in most states and territories now.
It is.
From my HR knowledge, yeah.
It is. But I think for me it's really demonstrative that you can, you know, still function even though you're experiencing a sensation, because that's what it is. I love talking more than anything, pretty much. Talking and observing people and listening is my favourite combination. So it doesn't matter what I'm going through. I know that's always going to make me feel a sense of self that I'm very comfortable with. So getting up and talking in front of men is always really exciting because, you know, you've just got that ability or capacity to make some change, whether that's just for one person or a few. I'm often talking about things that are quite unconventional, like you, Mike, based on my own lived experience. People don't understand that a female can also have a lived experience of men's health, especially around topics or social determinants that aren't often spoken about.
That leads nicely into my second question, Rae. So I'm not sure that you haven't.
We didn't even rehearse this, did we? No.
Some of the roles that you've held around men's mental health. So, you know, the Australian representative for the UK-based Global Action and Men's Health, and also the Australian Men's Health Forum. And you mentioned you've been to London, and earlier you'd done some international speaking. Well, just remind me where that was.
Borneo, last year at the Men's Health World Congress. That was with Global Action on Men's Health. But I think, you know, I've been on the board of the Australian Men's Health Forum for, I think, about 8 years now. And, you know, I remember one of the, you know, being interviewed for that board, and they asked me why do I have any interest in men's health? And I'd more recently over the, you know, years preceding that, had a good look at men's rights activism. And I quickly learned that that wasn't a place for me. That just felt like, you know, activism, and it felt like a pointless exercise in just fighting against something that didn't really need fighting against. And I also reflected back on my reasons, and I've always understood my reasons. You know, I was raised in an environment, you know, as a small child where, you know, it was quite a traumatic environment where men were perpetrators of behaviours that weren't conducive to my good mental health and wellbeing, which is where, my anxiety and depression comes from. However, it always sat really firm with me. And I left home at a very young age, my early teens, to get away from that. But what happened to them to make them like that really, really sat with me. And it still does today when I'm looking at behaviour in anybody. What happened to you to make you like that? And I think that's kind of, the edge that I have in staying away from my unconscious bias, judgment and own stigmatising of situations is there's always a reason why somebody behaves like they do. So as, getting onto the board of the Australian Men's Health Forum was amazing in that now I'm sort of looking at proper research and I'm looking at lack of pathways to support men, not just here in Australia but in the world, our lack of policy, our lack of strategy to create pathways for men to actually understand what are some of the challenges that they face. And that, has been a real learning space for me. I've been very, very fortunate to be amongst, sector leaders who really care about men's health and women's health. So moving on to the board of the Australian Men's Health, onto the Global Action on Men's Health has given me obviously a more global picture of how we're looking at this from a policy perspective and, an academic perspective, because before that, I can still see myself if I look back years ago, not that many years ago, that I'm still going, yeah, but what about men? What about men? There's no policy for men. There's no this for men, prostate cancer, blah, blah, blah. Workplace deaths, they're all very true, 95% of workplace deaths are still men, which is why you and I are talking about this today. That's why I'm going to Sydney next week, because that is a real thing. Suicide, men dominate the suicide stats. Cancer, you're wearing your cancer T-shirt. Men dominate those stats as well. Heart disease, I could keep going on. But my stance around, but what about men, has moved through these influences to it's an everybody's issue. And men play a really big role in things like their own health, domestic violence. Not that I believe that, most men don't perpetrate violence. However, men are part of the solution for that, sector that do perpetrate violence. And, in my experience of being a young person who left home very early and being, mentally affected by my own experiences, I definitely impacted the health and wellbeing of men that I were with in my early stages. I was violent towards men, and that wasn't verbally or psychologically, it was, but also physically. And I can't underscore enough that by not taking care of women's health in all respects, like me at that age, I needed help for my behaviour. But I didn't get it because nobody can really look through that lens to say that women also need help for behaviour and violence. So
let me ask you a question. You said so many things there that trigger off. So I'm just abandoning my questions at the moment. I'm just going to follow the conversation because it's really intriguing. So the younger Rae that you've described that had emotional reactions and behaviour that you reflect on differently now, to that trajectory of the international speaker that I'm sitting across the studio from now, was there a pivot point where you said, this is what my passion is, this is what my purpose is? And if there was that pivot point, can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't think there's ever been a pivot point in my life. I think I spoke before about just jump and the safety net will appear. I think because the influences of men in my life, I painted a picture very early on. However, when I left home up until now, and I only reflected on this on International Women's Day last year when I was invited to speak at an event, and they really wanted me to speak about, how terrible women have things and how we're so disadvantaged in the workplace. And I'd reflected early, it's actually white Australian men, and I counted about 35 of them on my trajectory that have given me the respect, the permission and pathway to be whoever I wanted to be.
Wow.
So that wasn't a pivot. That was a gradual burning and understanding as I reach, stages of my life I'm very reflective to see what gratitude pieces I can really step upon and step up to continue that trajectory for myself. So it's always been there. Understanding, recognising it and igniting it, I think, are the keys to where that's headed.
Let me put a humanistic piece over the next question then. So I'm here talking to Rae Bonney, international speaker, policy maker, helper of companies. I had a chat with somebody not too long ago, and your name came up in conversation, and they said, "Wow, Rae, yeah, if it wasn't for Rae, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for Rae, I wouldn't be here." So if 16-year-old Rae was listening on the conversation that we're having now, what do you think she would think?
Fuck. That's a really big responsibility. I'm assuming this person is suggesting they wouldn't be here literally, not in their position, in their job.
I'm pretty sure the metaphor was to say that they would no longer be on this planet if it wasn't for some of the interactions with yourself.
Yeah, that probably would have been my reaction as a 16-year-old, because I could not probably back then even qualify or quantify what that meant, let alone the impact that you might have through the work that you have. And, my role certainly is not about helping people or giving advice to people. My role is to listen, understand, and then through my collection of life is to help people make sense of where they might be and empower that person to self-manage. I think that's, very, very poignant in my work. It's how to enable people to manage themselves rather than be dependent. So I think now I know that person you're talking about. An absolutely stellar example of somebody who really wants to work towards creating a better life for themselves.
I think there's probably multiple examples of that person as well, right? Well, let me bring it in with, I always say to people, the dumber my questions, the better the outcomes. So we've talked about men and men's reluctance to open up. I recently became involved with Melbourne's men's group. I actually done some training for them, and they invited me to go to one of their sessions. And I must be honest, I went along as a professional observer and very, very quickly realised there was more to it than that. And it's a safe environment for men to talk about things. In a nutshell, why do you think I'm going to talk about men, why do you think we're so bad at opening up and talking about our feelings, particularly around mental health?
I would strongly, emphatically disagree with that statement that men are so bad at doing that. One of my greatest interests is how we're raising boys. And one of my probably most controversial statements I love to make is that if our more feminist community are still complaining about taking primary care of raising children, then what the hell are you doing to our boys in raising our boys? So I look at boys, I work with boys in a therapeutic sense, and every time, they're reluctant to come. But as soon as they sit down 5 minutes in, 2 hours later, it's like, wow, that went so fast. So we're not creating environments where boys, boys and girls are different. They just are. We're made differently biologically. However, we evolve through the life cycle. That's okay. But biologically, boys and girls are made differently. So how we raise boys, and I read something really cool on LinkedIn yesterday. It was a response to some programs that they're bringing into schools here in Victoria about fixing boys. So fixing teenage boys against the likes of Andrew Tate and telling them what they should not be listening to. And this guy, used a lot of expletives in that, well, if you're just going to tell boys what they can't do instead of really listening to what they need. If Andrew Tate's an influence, then what influence are you? If you're not influencing the way that your boys are being raised, and face it, we don't raise boys to self-care. We actually raise boys a lot of the time to get out there, play sport. We still glorify injury in sport. If a boy is injured and continues to play, he is awarded as a hero. And he's celebrated as a hero. That is a form of self-harm, I'm afraid. and parents who watch that go by, not allowing your children any domestic responsibility is another form of, I think it's almost borders on child abuse. You're not allowing your child to be raised to self-care, to self-manage, to survive. So typically boys will be excluded from domestic duties. I know, all three of my kids, 2 boys and a girl, from the age that they can talk and walk, they have their own shopping list that they shop with. It doesn't matter if they get it right or wrong. They know how to do all that stuff.
There's a book that was published last year, maybe the year before. It's a book called The Anxious Generation by Dr. Jonathan Haidt. And a bit of a spoiler, but there's 2 things he identifies that are impacting the mental health of adolescents. And one is the habitual use of social media. And one of the other things he identifies is in 1995, when statistically Western societies were the safest they had been, we took children off the streets because we were worried about bad things, because that date coincided with 24/7 news. Every 15 minutes you get in the news flash about the bad person. And we took children away and put them in front of these computers that they understood better than us. And all of a sudden they were in a very different and quite dangerous environment to be in. One of the points he makes very eloquently is that human interaction of, we're playing in the street, I push you, you push me, I get upset, you see my reaction. There's no left swipe or right swipe and unfriending. Do you think that's making the challenges, not just for boys, but for girls, do you think it's compounding their ability to cope with the mental rigours of life because of the difference in, I'm not going to say the way that we were brought up, but certainly the new world we have around digital interactions rather than human interactions?
Well, I believe myself that, we're at a very evolutionary stage of technology. If we go on the equation that human beings F up 80% and fix 20% at all times, I think that is where we are. And I like, when you were speaking about, the age of unsafety, it was sort of in the late 60s and early 70s, here in Australia, that we started experiencing things like child abduction. So that's where, we were taking kids off the street. But that also coincided with an age where we had video recorders. So now we could entertain within our houses. It also coincided with things like air conditioning and central heating. Now we don't have to go out on the street because we can stay cool and be entertained and be safe at the same time. And then, of course, that has evolved to, more digital stuff where we never have to leave our house. In fact, we don't even have to leave our house for food anymore. We can get that. So I think I can see lots of different initiatives, especially in schools, about digital health and how we are helping our kids understand the dangers of technology. Even physical health around our eyes and our ears and things like that, the research is just coming out now. So we're now responding to it. And I'm certain that's going to happen because there are so many amazing benefits to technology as well. It's not all bad. The way that we learn, the way that kids can learn, the way that we can connect with each other through safety. There's loads of great things about technology. We just have to iron them out and be very mindful and, even see how, generations now that are having babies are a lot more mindful about the dangers of technology, and hopefully we'll be responding to that. But going back to your point also about, men not taking care of themselves, before we go to the break, it was a really significant story a guy told me a few years ago, and I was speaking at a men's health session somewhere, and we were outside, and I love my vintage car, which is now sadly written off, but anyway, that's another story. And this guy also had a vintage car, and we were standing out there. I said, "Oh, is that yours?" And he said, "Yeah, it is." And I said, "Oh, that's really cool." And it was mint. And I said to him, "Who takes care of it?" Because it was like, it was showroom material. He said, "Oh, I do everything." And I said, "Wow, that is really cool. Where do you find the time to do that?" He goes, "Oh, weekends and stuff like that. I love it. But, I still spend time with my wife and kids, but they understand because they love it too." And I said, "Oh, who taught you how to do all that, mechanically and everything? He said, oh, my dad.
Mm.
And I said, oh, right. So how did your dad do that? Oh, my dad spent so much time with me showing me how to fix cars. And this man was of a stature that he was in a much larger body than he should have been. He was smoking. He didn't look well at all. And I said, tell me, who showed you to take care of yourself? And he said, what do you mean? I said, who showed you? Think about that word. Who showed you how to do it? He said, and he looked at me and he almost went away. He said, nobody. So this man knew how to keep this car in mint condition, but no idea how to care for himself because nobody had ever shown him. So that's why I would like to really, really strongly contradict that men are really bad at it. Boys just aren't shown.
I love that. I love that. Feeling a very emotional reaction at that story. What a great story.
Yeah, it was like, wow. And that's, where you make these connections. So my work with men is showing them stuff like that to go, oh, right, now I get it.
Yeah.
Now I can go away and do something about that because no one's telling me you need to stop smoking, you need to stop drinking, you need to. No man's going to go to a doctor if he relies on alcohol because his relationship's broken down, he's not seeing his kids anymore because he's being alienated from them, and going to work, all of the money is going towards paying for something that he doesn't even see. So if he goes to the doctor, the first thing he's going to do is a blood test to say, hey, your liver markers are pretty bad, you need to stop drinking. He doesn't want to hear that. So, in terms of healthcare and giving men other options to say, okay, the things that we need to help you with at the moment, you need to see your kids. You need some financial health. You need a place to live. You need safety and security because all of that's been taken away. That's what you need before we start telling you what to do. Yeah.
And all of the things you've just said then, workplaces need to be cognizant that that's what's turning up at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, I got one of my questions and then I just went right off script, Rae. So thanks for those answers. They were very powerful.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me a little bit of a stage on my own radio show to talk about.
You're welcome.
Very emphatically and passionately about, my experiences because they are experiences. They're not. I think textbooks are wonderful in guiding us into places, but very much, we gave a little, bit of a celebration of the work of the great George Negus earlier in the show, who passed away recently. But George Negus, through his work with 60 Minutes and, the other shows, gave us a taste of what we could find out about. He showed us news in a way that it wasn't just so much about the fact, it was really inspiring us to go that next step to find out more about what's really going on and, really miss correspondents like George Negus who just made it so easy for us to consume news.
I think they give us a lens to a world that we otherwise hadn't seen before.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to another break, and this is a little story behind this song because this is your next song. And when you texted it to me, you texted me "Thunder Toad" by Bruce Springsteen, and I thought, oh wow, is this a bit of a parody? I didn't know that Bruce Springsteen did that kind of music, but it's actually not at all. It's Thunder Road by
The Boss.
The Boss. What is The Boss doing these days?
He's still out on tour and he's still ripping it up.
Because how old would he be now?
I think he's 104.
104.
Oh, he's into his 70s and wearing it well.
Yeah, no. I really, again, you admire these people who bring so much joy to the world. So without further ado, and when we come back, we're going to talk a bit about the health and safety show that we're both heading up to next week, what we're talking about, and also the work that you and I are doing together, because we finally did get our gig together. And, over the last, 6 months, Mike and I have been collaborating with clients together, sharing them in a way that really highlights to me that our space is not competitive, it's collaborative. And it has to be, because we are making this stuff up as we go in an educated way, of course, and compliant way, but you have to collaborate.
Two brains are always better than one.
unless they're stupid brains. Anyway. Here we go. Here's the boss. Don't go away. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. The time is 35 minutes past 11 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney, and sitting opposite me is the amazing Mike Hagan. How would you describe yourself these days, Mike? Like, what are you?
What am I? Well, I can't use the failed electrician line again. What am I? I'm a fairly content and happy individual. Doing things that I think make a difference is what I would shoot with from the hip, Rae.
Not to mention a Sally's Gap filler and accomplished musician. Now, you were down in sunny, you told me it was
Seaford.
Yeah. Oh, Seaford, yes. Yeah. Last night, banging out a few tunes for cancer.
We were, yeah. It was a charity event to raise funds for the Peter Mac Foundation. Put together from some friends who've been touched significantly, their family by cancer last year, and they just pulled a lot of favours back in from some great bands, some great musicians. So I got to open up with the Distant Conspirators. We didn't do any Springsteen, but I got to open up, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So what did that song mean for you?
Thunder Road. Yeah, Thunder Road used to be, I think still is, one of my, let's call it a grounding technique for when I suffer from anxiety. And I've talked to people over the years, and they'll tell me the grounding techniques they've got if they're feeling anxious or panicked. And some people recite their times tables. They give the brain something else to do. Mine used to be Thunder Road.
Wow.
And I know it worked perfectly, because on many occasions, if I was in the car and I was feeling anxious, I'd be belting out Thunder Road at the top of my voice, or I could be sitting in an airport lounge going through the lyrics in my head, and that focus helped ground me, which was great until I went to see The Boss. So many years later, I went to see The Boss in Amy Park, and he come back for the encore, and great narrator, and he tells the story and sets a song up. And he talked about he was going to do a song that he knew had been, so meaningful to so many people. And I'm there with 80,000 people, but Bruce is talking to me. He's talking to me. And he got the acoustic out and stood there on his own and done this rendition of Thunder Road. And I stood and sobbed. And the people either side of me must have thought, what on earth is going on? But such a powerful emotional trigger. And so thank you, Bruce. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. So did anyone say anything to you?
No, not really. Not really. People sort of respectfully let me have my moment. It wasn't an unhappy sob. It was just this...
No.
Sob.
But it's when I was saying goodbye to George in London, my son, and we sort of just, winding down the time. So Rory and I were just about to get on the train to Heathrow, and George is on his push bike, and we get to the train station, and it's like, I said, let's just pretend that we're just going to see each other tomorrow. And George goes, yeah, that's a really good idea. That's a great idea. And so I said, okay, bye. I start hugging him. And then the taps just turned on in my eyes. And so I'm just gushing like water out of my eyes. And then he's like feeling like really upset as well. And Rory's just looking at it going, oh, well, I'm 15, so I don't really care. And so walked into, I don't remember which station it was, and this man just pulled me aside and he said, are you okay? I thought it was such a lovely thing for him to do, complete stranger. And I said, I've just said goodbye to my son.
That's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, cried all the way to Heathrow. and then some. But I love crying. It's a really nice feeling, and I think that holding people in sadness is a beautiful thing. Something we should not be scared about.
Share one thing that you mentioned the gig yesterday.
Yes.
An observation I made yesterday. So I was the MC. So they picked the person with the least Australian accent to MC the event. So you're on stage, you can see people. The amount of men that were coming together and hugging each other on greeting.
Yeah.
And I thought 20 years ago, you would not have seen that.
No.
But just much more tactile,
Yeah.
and authentic and genuine with it, and it was good to see.
You know what that comes down to? They've been shown that that's okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Because we see it now depicted on, our media, our TVs, our movies. It's become a cool thing, through the work of Movember, who really brought the face of men's health to a real collaborative stage. It's about everybody. Mateship has become a key driver in men's health as well. So there's so much research that shows us that mateship helps keep men alive. And the amount of time, I reckon once a week at least, I will hear a story from one of the males in my circles of how just that conversation they had with another male saved their life.
Yeah, it's so very powerful. There was some statistics. I think it was a TED Talk I was watching last week, and the lady made a beautiful point. Just two statistics. Statistically, there has never been more people on the internet than there is today. And then if you look at the statistical information from Gallup, who do the happiness polls, loneliness has never been as high as it is today. So
yeah, that's right. The loneliest spaces are in crowds of people, which we're still not coming on to. And, even, we're talking about the health and safety, workplace health and safety show in Sydney that we're both going up to. See, when did we ever reach that stage, Mike, where we're both so famous that we're both heading off to Sydney to speak at the same event? But I'm speaking about constructive conversations, navigating mental health in the construction industry, and that, is probably key to some of the things that I'm talking about. It's not about how do we keep men physically safe in those spaces, because, physical health and safety is one of those obvious things because of the physical nature in those industries. But as you said before, it's when that person arrives at work, what state are you arriving in that keeps you as healthy and safe as possible, not to mention you, but everyone around you as well. So I think, I know I've spoken on the show because I interviewed, in fact, had on as a key guest, a man who was in my audience at an event that I did for Men's Health Week in June this year, and it was just around the corner from here in Box Hill at a union site, construction site. And I was just doing having a bit of fun at 6 o'clock in the morning, as you do in a room full of high vis. I said, put up your hand if you've experienced, domestic violence where you're the victim. And then I said, put up your hand if you've experienced paternal postnatal depression. And this one guy stuck up his hand, and from there, that putting up his hand has helped so many men. Even today, that show still gets listened to. Yeah. Men are still coming forward and going, I did not know that it happened to me or is happening to me at the moment.
I listened to that show, and what my takeaway from it was, it's almost like there isn't a permission for men to have that condition, It's
no, there isn't, because that is just not anything that we know anything about, nor, it's not your role. We have to be only caring for women and children in that respect.
We need to change so many paradigms about how we think, don't we?
So good old Dave Bamber, if you're listening in, Dave, thank you again for putting up your hand and being that man.
And Dave, I loved your choice of music on the show as well, so thanks for that, mate.
That was hardcore country and western, wasn't it?
It was the proper stuff, yeah.
Now tell me, what are you talking about in Sydney?
It's an equally convoluted title. It's navigating the ownership of navigating the ownership of psychosocial risk in the workplace. Prefixed by a title which has been added on since I agreed to do the talk that says HR versus health and safety.
Oh, so somebody listened to that podcast as well, did they?
That basically came off the back of that, and that's how things tend to happen. But it really is to what I try and do is to have an authentic and open conversation to say, look, everybody, this is what we're all trying to achieve. We're all trying to address the behaviours that bring poor mental health into a workplace. We're trying to address the structural and work design that doesn't work. So let's do it collectively. And addressing that point I made earlier, that it is the biggest anchor, it is the biggest drag on progressive changes around it. And look, I have a bit of fun with it. I've got a lot of health and safety people maybe wanting to bag HR, and a lot of HR people being defensive about health and safety. So I won't say I do a pantomime part to the actual presentation, but I have introduced a game called HR Bingo, which I'm going to use in Sydney. So if you're in the vicinity, come along and play HR Bingo. It's all...
Do you play in couples or, Or...
No, it's a mass event. It's a mass event.
Right, okay. Well, I'll be in the crowd, people, so look me up, find me. I'm probably in anything that's from candy pink to lime green. That'll be me.
But it's done with due respect to all parties and a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But as I say, in both camps, there's good people trying to do great things. We just need to align a little bit better. And we need to ensure the ownership is not left with a human resource function or a health and safety function. Yeah. It lies in two places. It lies with, the senior management of an organisation and all of us, every one of us.
Well, you mentioned earlier in the show about Mike Hagan Consulting Services, and for lack of an original name, but that is your name. The name of my business is Rae Bonney. That's it, and that's what we do. And earlier this year, I'm very fortunate to work with amazing clients who really, really do care about mental health and wellbeing in their workplace and health and safety, and quite often my entree into an organisation is just get Rae Bonney in, just talk to her. And I'm working with a client, from a mental health perspective, and I could see all of these other opportunities for them to really, really double down on what real health and safety and wellbeing and sustainability of their environment is in their workplace. And I said, you need Mike Hagan. So whilst you're working with Rae Bonney, now you also need Mike Hagan. And so that's where you and I really started our collaboration on how we can provide so many other opportunities and options for workplaces to get across the gamut of what their responsibility to themselves and their people is.
It's funny, because not only with the organisations that we're collaborating on, but a lot of organisations, they'll say, we need you to come and talk about mental health. And then they look a little bit quizzical when I say, can I see your contracts? Can I have a look at your policies and procedures around sexual discrimination, harassment and bullying? Oh, you're not going to talk about yoga. You're not going to talk about... No, I'm not. I want to understand the things that form your culture within the organisation, and I want to talk to people. And I think one of the things I'm enjoying about working with yourself is, we've both got that that broad horizon that is people, whether it be from a human resource point of view, your side from the counselling. I can do the legal compliance bit that puts most people to sleep, but I can make that understandable to humans.
And relevant.
So I think what I'm really enjoying about it, two things. One is the broad horizon we cover, and I'm just learning a huge amount from yourself as we go through that, so loving it.
Yeah. So anyone interested in the Mike and Rae show in any respect, you want us to come and speak, you want us to come and consult, we do that together separately, but always, as I said, with this collaborative lens on things that we don't own the space. We're not experts in the space, but we have a lot of experience, and together is always better. There you go. There's another one for you.
I'll maybe bring the guitar along. Who knows?
Now, I've also recently been asked on to a research project with RMIT around digital resources with relation to mental health in the workplace. And I sat with them just on Friday and explored what it is that, where is it at, in terms of how we're evolving in it. Is there a space for it? And why, what sorts of organisations have an appetite for digital resources? And some of the questions were around, do we need psychologists to be part of evolving these apps or these platforms? How are people using them? Why are they using them? And, my experience is, I guess, from a perspective of EAP, so our traditional employee assistance programs used to be employees could get free counselling, 3 sessions, usually over the phone, sometimes face-to-face, and that was the offering. Whereas now I see organisations that I speak to, you even mentioned Trademut before. Trademut are an amazing charity, specifically in the men's health space, who some people think they just make shirts. Yeah, they make amazing shirts, but under the lapel of the shirt, there's this really cool barcode that you're out on site, you're in the middle of nowhere, your mate's in trouble, you flip up your lapel, scan this barcode on your phone, it will take you direct to a counselling service called TAX, which is also funded as well. So that's a mental health service.
This is a conversation starter, TAX, isn't it? It's a great acronym.
Yes. Yeah. So, that is that technology? Absolutely it is. And does it work? Absolutely it does. I know it saves lives because people have told me it has saved their life. So when we're looking at technology and how that affects change, one of the other questions that RMIT asked me, who's playing in this space, and said there's people there clearly to make money. And there's an opportunity to make a quick money on something that person wants. They see an opportunity, mental health in the workplace. I've got this app. So their research is very much based on what they want. Whereas then you look, and in Trademut and TX is just one example of many, that they are actually catering to the market that they know. And that's men out remotely in the field. Typically, that's where it started. Now it's extended so much further, even to women. But they knew their point in the sand, and they went for it.
I like their focus because it was around tradies and sole traders and people that, you mentioned EAPs, employee assistance programs, which should be a foreign concept to somebody who's, a mum, dad and lad organisation, not somebody working on their own. But what they do is just, I've never seen anybody else do it before. It's free counselling to people that can't get to that kind of counselling. And geography isn't an issue because of the things you mentioned. It's a beautiful organisation. I've got a TX sticker on one of my guitars. So
have you?
I do indeed.
And you mentioned that you saw me in TX shirts on my website as well.
I've got a couple, and I'm colourblind and they look good. So
yeah, no, they are really good. But I think any mental health wellbeing app is as good as you make it as well. And I mentioned before about, my boyfriend, Andrew Huberman, and I, how we collaborate every day on neuroscience. But when I gave up drinking alcohol, I used an app called Reframe. That's it. It's so good I can't even remember what it's called. But Reframe, amazing. Really, it's about the science of what alcohol does to you, as opposed to you need to give up because, and really understanding how that affected me. But, I used that app for a good year because it engaged me in a community, which was really helpful. I was able to talk to people who were having the same experience. I was able to engage every single day on the science behind it, the reasons why. So I never actually had to think about, I need to stop drinking. It was just every day there was a reason why I should.
I always think, and
that was an app.
I think there's two things. There's an app and the behaviour that the app influences. There's an organisation I do some subcontracting for, a great organisation, and they give me an app. And every morning at 9 o'clock, I get a prompt to do a happy face or a sad face, and I'm generally a optimistic kind of person, so they're generally happy. Until the morning I woke up and tested positive for COVID, being the same day I had Foo Fighter tickets. So it got a sad face that day, Ray. It got a sad face. So that was the app. 20 minutes later, I got a call from the senior psych within that organisation saying, Mike, just checking in on you. 40 minutes later, I got an email from the general manager of the company saying, Mike, just checking in on you. So it's where that technology leads to and that human action that supports it. And I thought that was fantastic.
Well, what a great story to go out on. That's really, really inspiring. So it's about options, isn't it, Mike? It's not about one solution, one fix it. The real work comes from what we can influence on our insides because we cannot control our outsides.
Very, very true. We have zero influence about what might happen tomorrow. We've got 110% influence on how we choose to respond.
The influence that I have currently is that the divine Paula Hogg, who's coming up next on 3WBC, has just come into the studio. I've looked at the time. We have a cozy 5 minutes left. Probably won't get our last song in, but Paula's rolling out an entire lazy Sunday afternoon of music and banter bound to get you relaxed. Also, I just want to let everybody know, if any of our discussions today have brought up uncomfortable feelings, please remember help is there. We mentioned TX. I don't know the number for them. You'll have to go and buy the shirt. But Crisis Support Lifeline 131114 is the number there. Suicide Callback Service is 1300 659 467, and Emergency Services is 000. I also mentioned before about my unfortunate home invasion while I was overseas, and, you know, Mike and I were unpacking it, and I am having some pretty uncomfortable feelings since being back around safety and how that's impacting my anxiety. And I am going to be phoning Victims of Crime Helpline in the next few days, and that's a service that runs, I think, from 5 a.m. till 11 p.m. at night. I've not tried it yet, and I don't have the number on me now, but it's something that I didn't know about, how I can help manage my own feelings about things, my responsibility. So, Mike, thank you enormously for today. And
an absolute pleasure.
And I will see you in Sydney.
Yeah, indeed.
We're going to catch up there, and we are sleeping at the same place, not in the same room, but certainly we're staying at the same place at this, and we're both attending the workplace
health and safety show
in Sydney at Sydney Olympic Park.
I never thought I'd be playing Olympic Park.
23rd to the 24th of October.
Apparently the bosses played there as well.
Oh, there we go. Next month I'm going to be back, I think, on the 20th of November. Could be the 19th of November. And coming on the show, it's the 17th of November, is Jake Lambert. He's the Senior Manager Fundraising and Development at Movember. And he's also a dad, husband, and a man with a story. Last time I spoke with Jake, he had three screaming kids in the background. So be interested to see where Jake's at these days. So until then, everybody, stay safe. My going out song is only going to be probably for a few minutes, but it's Richard Marx and Hazard, because they spoke about it on Gold FM the other day. And they were laughing because Richard Marx evidently has just always asked what happened to Mary. And he said, I don't know, it was just a song I just made up.
My wife will be so impressed. She's a huge Richard Marx fan.
So here we go. Last few minutes. Stay safe, everybody. Bye. Say bye, Mike.
Bye, Mike.